I'd like to start by telling a story here. I've enjoyed anime since I was about 10 years old. A close friend of mine introduced it to me via Naruto and Code Lyoko, and it's gone on to shape the shows I watch and the outlook I have on art. Naruto, Soul Eater, and Fairy Tail all became the regular shows that I watched on a fairly regular basis, until I ended up going into slightly more obscure anime like Durarara, Guilty Crown, and Vampire Knight. I have fond memories of watching Attack on Titan up until episode 4 with my friend and being utterly captivated and horrified by the episode's conclusion, binging One Punch Man the night before going to Germany on an exchange program, and Assassination Classroom as I moved into my university dorm room. Anime has been an immense influence of my life, and I'm really happy about that. In 2016, an anime came out that I genuinely do not think it is an exaggeration to say changed the course of my life. My Hero Academia was a show I found around the time I was developing a more noted interest into Western comics. At the time, I was a big fan of the X-Men, and My Hero Academia seemed to be more of that. It was a manga I saw in my local store, but I turned away from it after seeing a giant lady sticking her ass at the camera and then going to myself, oh, it's one of those fucking manga. I happened upon an intro to the anime though, and I heard it was probably the most based intro I'd heard since Attack on Titan. I ended up looping the intro for more or less the entire day, even going out my way to find a full version, which didn't exist at the time, so I found a looped version which was clipped from the original, which worked and I'm pretty sure is still up to this day. After that I watched the anime and that's pretty much it. It's not an exaggeration to say My Hero Academia became my favourite anime of all time. This world, this concept, this main character, this style, this amazing pink creature, god damn it I love Mina, instantly enamored me. I read the entire manga the same day. Incidentally, this was around the time chapter 100 came out. I bought posters, I dyed half my hair white to go emulate Todoroki's, which I do to this day. I wrote fanfiction, a lot of fanfiction. Jesus Christ, I wrote a lot of fanfiction. At the time I was interested in games development and was attending a course in college. My Hero Academia changed the direction my creative passions were going. Rather than game design, I realised I wanted to work with comics, which I am still working at. I attend university now and study comics, and this is because of My Hero Academia. Although incidentally, one of the things you'll find out about game design is that by the time you're done, nobody wants to go into game design as a career. A course for the next 4 or 5 years was set for me. I met people I now consider close friends, and the things I want to do with my life were affected and influenced from the day I watched the first episode of this show. I have issues with the franchise and the way it's going, but I have sentimental value to it, in spite of the many problems My Hero Academia has made for itself, all of which I will relentlessly point out and criticise. I still care about My Hero Academia as a franchise, and I don't think I can bring myself to abandon it. It really did change a lot in how my life, the direction it was going, and how I thought about art. I unironically owe nearly everything about how my life has gone to My Hero Academia. It's the anime that influenced me the most. I love My Hero Academia. I don't think I'd be the same person if I never stumbled across this shonen. I complain about it a lot, but I don't think I'll ever be able to bring it myself to give it up. It means too much for me to do at this point. The politics of My Hero Academia have always played an interesting part of the world. My Hero Academia's universe is honestly full of kind of messed up shit when you actually stop to think about it and the implications that it has. It's been called out many times by people in the fandom about how the rules of this world tend to be selective and a bit odd. Of course, when we're dealing with a world that is as fascistic as My Hero Academia is, this sort of thing is common. What do you mean no one's talking about how My Hero Academia's world is a fascist one? No? Interesting. Let's see where this goes. When we look at the politics of a piece of media, there tend to be a few things that we have to take into consideration. The information available, if that information is canon or not, what the logical outcome of those politics leads to, and the characters who spout them. The same ideals coming from Steiner or a rocker can be radically different things because of the person who says them and the actions they take around them, so we have to take context into the situation. Before we get into this, I want to highlight one particular concept I think more or less every fan should take into heart, and that's death of the author. Death of the author, put simply, means that the reader's interpretation of a story is equally as valid as the interpretation that the author intended for the reader to get. To give an example, let's say you read Ayn Rand's books, where she talks about the world being a playground for the rich. You can take that message from Ayn Rand's book, or you can take the opposite message that the rich are beyond dangerous and that Ayn Rand is fucking insane. Under Death of the Author, both interpretations are valid. So when I go over the politics I can take away from My Hero Academia, I'm generally utilising Death of the Author. It doesn't necessarily matter if the author intended for me to gain those interpretations. That being said, I do think I have a strong case for My Hero Academia's climate, and I think at this point it's become undeniable that some of the political implications Horikoshi has been putting into his work and how the world of heroes is possibly one of the most oppressive regimes in all of mainstream anime. I'm going to start with my thesis here, and then I'm going to work to prove it with examples as we go along, as well as rhetoric. My Hero Academia's current society is fascist, or at the very least authoritarian. In either case, it is a ruthlessly capitalistic society in which the actual ideals of heroism have taken a backseat to maintaining a status quo which does not help the majority of the society, and the story that it tells promotes socialist, anarchist, and communist philosophies. Are you still with me after that? Let's have a look at the society of My Hero Academia. My Hero Academia, for those of you who don't know and have presumably been living on fucking Io these past 5 years, takes place in a world where the general population has developed superpowers, which are referred to as quirks. Quirks can be varied from being able to be super strong, to shoot fire, or have the abilities to be a frog, or shoot lasers out of your belly button, and also pull your own eyes out and look like I don't even know what the fuck this is supposed to be. Quirks are a diverse array of superpowers which, by and large, should have changed the face of the world in a very dramatic way. You would think that the world is generally more or less identical to the one we live in today, minus the giant robots, but never mind the implication of technological advancement there. Generally speaking, society is run exactly as it is for us. People still work their 9-to-5 jobs, with the only exception that someone who looks like a giant humanoid lizard might walk in by those crisps at the counter. They actually draw attention to this fairly early on in the manga, but we'll get around to that in a bit. From this, the profession of heroism becomes a big part of the world of My Hero Academia, becoming incredibly looked up to within the figures of the world. Heroes are people who are allowed to utilize their quirks in order to protect and save the general population from people who would otherwise utilize their quirks for selfish purposes, and also help in general search and rescue, natural disaster prevention, and so on and so forth. Our main character is Zuko Midoriya, who wants to become a hero in spite of being born quirkless. He meets All Might, a hero he admires, and he gives Zuko his quirk, and the rest of the manga is carried on after this. The premise of My Hero Academia is very straightforward and makes a lot of sense on the surface. With superpowers commonplace, it makes sense to utilize them and form heroes as an institution to protect the population from people who would otherwise use their quirks for selfish ends, and other situations where heroes would be beneficial. But already we're starting to see some signs of the world My Hero Academia takes place in being authoritarian in a few ways. For the sake of digestibility, let's look at how we're going to do this. We'll focus on 3 different aspects of the world: My Hero Academia Society, heroes as an institution, and the characters themselves. My Hero Academia Society is defined by a fair few things, but what is made very clear very fast is the prescription of Darwinism, and survival of the fittest have made rapid returns. Survival of the fittest is just as it sounds. The strong rule and the weak die, and this is very clearly a part of My Hero Academia Society. Strong quirks are praised, while weaker quirks are still encouraged, but other people are expected to think more realistically. Quirkless people, though, are more or less considered to be subhuman, relentlessly mocked if there's anything to go by. While other quirkless examples exist, like Melissa and Knuckle Duster. Melissa, we see very little of her childhood, and she is American, so it could be a cultural thing, and in the case of Knuckle Duster, he was born with a quirk but lost it, so that might be more akin to a disability as opposed to how Zuko's treatment is depicted as essentially a birth defect. For someone born without a quirk like Zuko, he is mocked and bullied for years for thinking above his station, while still aspiring to be a hero. While there don't seem to be any legal laws against the quirkless within My Hero Academia's world, that we know of, that doesn't really change the social pressures or expectations of the quirkless. This is common in a lot of fascist and authoritarian regimes. A selected underclass which are treated as dirt or as an enemy of the people. In Nazi Germany, this was the Jewish people, black people, and anyone who was born with a birth defect, which incidentally Zuko's quirkless has a result of. All of these groups were considered Untermensch, or subhuman, and were legally discriminated against by the Nazi government. Another example of this would be Imperial Japan, and Japan itself nowadays. Japan has a lot of fascist tendencies, but one of the more alarming ones is the way that bullying was treated in Japan. Kids were expected to not be involved in bullying incidents, and the bullied themselves were expected to fight back, take it, or in many cases, just kill themselves. There are a great many number of societies that have indulged in this sort of behaviour in the past, but this in and of itself doesn't even come close to creating a fascist society. It does, however, seem to be common in every fascist society to have ever existed. While we're on this topic, it's probably important to define fascism. And I would love to, except for the fact that fascism is basically undefinable. It's a complicated set of ideas which overlap and contradict and confuse people, and this is all done by design. Were a fascist to admit to being a fascist and everything that came with it, they would be deplatformed more or less instantly. So in many cases, they'll hide behind terms like white nationalists, black nationalists, identitarians, or classical liberals, but then they'll spout the same far-right talking points, such as cultural preservation, demographic changes, a question of democracy being a viable political apparatus, or maybe they'll just ramble on about Islam being incompatible with Western society and try to avoid answering when you ask them about the socialist region Rojava, which builds itself on many of the values of the West in every conceivable way, but also do it better than we do. Ironically, there's a whole lot of diversity in how fascism can manifest itself. This is why putting a firm pin on My Hero Academia's fascistic social tendencies is difficult. It is theoretically entirely possible for the world of My Hero Academia to take place in a democratic, but also fascistic and authoritarian regime in nature. The way Japan operates today has proved enough that this isn't exactly impossible. My Hero Academia does take place in Japan after all. I'd say that using Japan's government as an example of this is pretty fair and reasonable. We can't really say My Hero Academia society is imperialist, which makes it a lot harder to put a pin on if it's fascistic or not. We don't know if they're taking territory for the mother or fatherland, so that's a mark against my point. However, you can still have an isolationist fascist state. There are plenty of modern-day fascists who claim to be isolationist and do so with a desire to create an ethno-state, which again, modern Japan practically is. So that makes the job harder, but certainly not impossible. Japan has many fascistic tendencies, such as ethno-nationalism to rampant xenophobia. There's a lot of racism in Japan. It's a pretty racist country. Does this make Japan fascist in of itself? Of course not. But it is worth noting that pretty much every single fascist society that has ever existed has gone down these two particular routes as well. Nations like Brazil will be an example of a modern nation going down a deeply fascistic route, as well as the recent coup in Bolivia, both of which have cracked down on the natives of those respective countries. When we talk about fascism, though, there are a few definitive features that we can generally point out and definitively call fascistic. Authoritarianism, suppression of freedom of speech and individual rights, hero worship, the worship of service to the state, lying and suppression of knowledge and misinformation, and an obsession with aesthetics and strength. Oh dear. What we do know about My Hero Academia society is that Quirks are heavily oppressed. Only heroes are allowed to use them freely and openly in public, whereas those who use their powers for simple convenience tend to be harassed by the police or taken into the custody of heroes. While self-defense laws reportedly exist, none of them really apply to Izuku, Ida, or Todoroki, tackling the villain Stain, and we'll return to him shortly. So the laws seem to be a bit inconsistent, and it's hard to tell if that's part of the world or just inconsistent writing. I'm just going to assume it's intentional. It has been hinted that some quirks can be utilised in more common workplaces, but these appear to be few and far between and require permits and regulations to be utilised in any meaningful way. Enough that a huge amount of the population want to become heroes, as once again, it's stated to be the only way people are allowed to use their quirks freely. Regardless, the message is there. If you want total freedom to use your powers, you'll become a hero. It needs to be stressed as well, quirks aren't like guns. Nearly everyone is born with a quirk as an intrinsic part of their biology, yet only a small portion of the people are allowed to ever use them freely. It's the equivalent of having to live with an eye patch over your eye for your entire life. Not all that harmful, and you can manage without it, but god damn it, if you can just use that eye to see again, your quality of life would multiply. Because of this, people either turn to villainy or sign up for heroism. By suppressing quirks and allowing them to be used freely, My Hero Academia society never has a lack of recruits for the roles of heroes. In fact, so many volunteers exist, the society is an oversaturation of heroes in general. It's also worth noting that My Hero Academia society does have a tendency to suppress freedom of speech and the freedom of information. To give an example, Stain's speech has been mentioned to have been taken down by authorities a great number of times despite being placed back online by various individuals, and Gran Torino himself admits that the society they live in is a world of suppression. This is something people are aware of and have practically been shown to be conditioned to just accept as a fact of life. While everything I'm going to say in this video does relate to this society of My Hero Academia, this is where I want to leave it in terms of talking directly about the society. Now we need to talk about the heroes. And this is where things start to become incredibly questionable. Heroes are, for the most part, superpowered police officers. They go on patrol, they talk with the community, and they enforce law whenever it's necessary to do so. Heroism is steeped into a wide variety of fields, from naval work to normalised patrol patterns, to entire agencies which work together as a communal force against villainy. One major source of concern, however, is the fact that heroes have to compete with each other for popularity in order to get money. What? Yes, and a truly bizarre set of heroes apparently get paid according to popularity and are downright encouraged to compete with one another for their time in the spotlight to the point they're willing to completely undermine other heroes while to get through into the camera. Sorry, what? Further adding into this system, heroes are allowed to create brand images to themselves act in advertisement, promote corporate products, and essentially become celebrities within society, which further encourages them to screw one another over in an effort to push their particular brand even further. The richest of heroes are shown to be people like All Might and Endeavour, who own literal towers and have product placements nearly all over the entire planet. Let me get this straight, My Hero Academia. You have a system of public protection in place where you encourage those public protectors to actively try to screw each other over in order to get popularity points and brand deals. Who designed this system, and why were they not immediately slapped and thrown off a bridge? This is a massive red flag towards the fascistic tendencies, because just about every single fascistic nation has incorporated corporate power into the state, which is more or less what's happened here. Remember I said the heroes were essentially superpowered policemen? That becomes a lot more of a creepy situation when it turns out they're being sponsored by Sell It Bang or whoever. It creates a conflict of loyalties between the people the heroes are supposed to be protecting and the people who are paying for their food. While the government pay is still a thing, the conflict of interest remains, and it would probably be very easy for a private corporation to match or even surpass the payroll of a pro-hero. And this is just allowed. There's typically a reason why police officers are encouraged to not do stuff like take free beers or product samples from the people they're helping. I mean, they still fucking do it, and it's pretty subjective if they'll do it or not, but they at least keep the illusion of wanting their officers to not have to succumb to this sort of thing. And the hero society are downright financially incentivized to do so. Allowing heroes to create their own agencies with their own financial interests is a dangerous tactic. Hypothetically, if there was a riot against corruption in the Japanese government, or when a press group began to protest their treatment, who exactly would the heroes side with? If they were to remain loyal to the tenets of heroism, they would side with the protesters, surely. That's their supposed job, protecting the innocent. Except their finances are tied into that of the state, and they need to eat bread so as not to starve. If we take it a step further, let's say that the unfair treatment of Quirks within society, the oppression, the authoritarianism, and the grinding wheels of capitalism have forced people to revolt, and the socialist revolution is underway. Again, are heroes expected to side with the common population? They're economically heavily incentivized to maintain the status quo. A status quo which actively hurts people, but that they benefit from. By the way, if you think that My Hero Academia doesn't have anything to say about capitalism, you're fucking joking. My Hero Academia's world is rampantly capitalistic, and that's been highlighted from day one within Bakugo of all people. The strong gain power, they gain money, they control the world through brute force and through finances, all on the basis of their genetics and their quirks, and characters like Uraraka have been shown to be affected by these systems, which have caused her family a great deal of harm. Heroes signing business deals and being plastered all over soda cans, and entire business studies being devoted to promoting heroes on a marketability basis as opposed to their skills of protecting the general population existing within UDA itself. Capitalism is a huge part of My Hero Academia society. Cut it out pretending that it isn't. A certain character noticed this and again called it out, but again we'll get to him. Suffice it to say, when you incorporate the powers of the state within that of corporations, you end up with a system in which those who are supposed to be in theory protecting the general population having their personal interests tied to that of the state and the maintenance of the status quo. A status quo which, again in My Hero Academia's case, is that of one that struggles to maintain itself and causes active harm to a great many people. It's interesting to note that from what we've seen, hero exams seem to be based more on raw power as opposed to intellect and cunning, or even quirks that are around just not being capable of breaking shit. Shinso was a good example of someone screwed over by this land of sand. Well, he's now getting his chance in the manga. It's only because he's being trained by Aizawa, utilising captured cloth and a voice modulator, and one does have to wonder why that wasn't suggested initially and why he had to basically waste a year in general studies. Seems a bit odd, but anyway, the point I'm trying to make in a somewhat roundabout way is that heroism seems to favour marketability and power more than anything else, which ties it into the corporate side of things, encouraging those who have high marketability and strength to become icons of the state. Actual heroism almost seems secondary feature to what it means to be a hero. The main concern of a lot of heroes have is their public image. And now we're going to reach the main reason I think My Hero Academia Society promotes the views I believe it to promote. The characters. While I have many flaws with certain characters, My Hero Academia's cast is generally fairly solid. A lot of the designs are pretty damn good, and most are fairly well written, at least within the main circle. I have multiple issues with characters that are just side characters, and don't get any sort of development whatsoever, but that's mostly down to Horikoshi's writing. Several characters can be placed into certain political ideologies, and they represent those ideologies themselves, but there are 4 characters that I primarily want to focus on. That's Izuku, Shigaraki, All Might, and Stain. When we look at Izuku, it's very clear from the get-go what we have here. A lonely kid who was bullied and treated like dirt for much of his life, but idealizes heroism and wants to be one. While he possesses generally sympathetic outlooks on life to a great number of characters, outside of that his politics have been fairly unmentioned. However, I think I can make a strong argument that Izuku's political ideology puts him in the camp of anarchism. Anarchism, for those of you who don't know, is not the idea of no government, rule the streets and smash in whoever's head you like. That would refer to the state of anarchy. In terms of political ideology, anarchism is the philosophy that all unjust hierarchy should be abolished in order to make people as equal socially as is possible. To give a very simple example, let's take the concept of the peasant and the nobles. In feudal terms, peasants lived in regions that were ruled by nobles who had far more power in government, decided where the peasants would live, how they worked, and what they would do for work, and could order that if they so required. Their labour would then be sent to those nobles who would engage in trade, so on and so forth, yada yada yada. To an anarchist, this way of life is unacceptable. Nobility should not exist, because it is an unjust hierarchy which grants nobles an unjust and unparalleled amount of control over the lives of peasants, and that makes them fundamentally unequal. To use a bit more of a modern example, an anarchist would also argue that there are certain institutions within the government and within business that put, say, black people at a disadvantage as opposed to white people. This was settled in a study, where several job applicants were sent to a workplace, and those who had black-sounding names were rejected on a far more regular basis than those who had white names, despite having equal qualifications. This is a form of social hierarchy which an anarchist would say is completely unjustified. Going even further, because race is a social construct according to all the evidence that reputable organisations have gathered, which we developed during the Atlantic slave trade to justify the supremacy over certain groups, an anarchist like myself would go as far as to argue that race is a concept that should be abolished because its mere existence incentivizes hierarchy. Anarchism is fundamentally a collectivist ideology which encourages egalitarianism and community. To put it simply, a community of people who work together, help one another, and work democratically, flattening any social hierarchies developed where they would cause more harm than they would cause good. Izuku has shown himself to be, while awkward, a very social person who has opposed a lot of the social hierarchy imposed upon him. For example, wanting to be a hero despite being quirkless. He's been shown to only really interact with the hero ranking system as he is absolutely required to, because that's the way the hero society seems to work. What I think highlights his true anarchic tendencies, though, is how he deals with the Todoroki situation. Throughout the fight that he has with Todoroki, Izuku shows complete dismissal at the idea of hereditary hierarchy. Quirks are typically passed down from their parents to their children, and are either a mix of the 2 quirks or just one quirk in its entirety. In this instance, Todoroki possesses a mixture of both his father and mother's quirks split directly down the middle, his right side producing ice and his left side producing fire. Todoroki's father is Endeavor, the second-ranked hero in the hero society, essentially forced Todoroki's mother to marry him and almost certainly rape her in order to breed a child who possessed a mixture of quirk which could then be used to surpass All Might as the #1 hero. Apparently his logic being that if someone with his quirk surpasses All Might, that will basically be the same thing as surpassing him himself. Not entirely sure how this works, but we'll roll with it. Izuku fights this throughout the entire match, shouting and punching and breaking his bones to an unfathomable degree, not to hammer a single point home to Todoroki, that his quirk isn't his father's, it's his. He rejects the hereditary hierarchy, and pushes Todoroki to do the same, which he does, and it turns out to be the push Todoroki needed to get past the reservations about his quirk. Another factor about his anarchic tendencies is that he disobeys orders from heroes a hell of a lot. He disobeyed them at the USJ, he disobeyed them during his internship with Gran Torino, he disobeyed them at the Sports Lodge to the point Aizawa said, yeah, there's basically no point trying to stop you, is there? And then going completely behind the back of the heroes to rescue Bakugo in a completely illegal move in just about every single sense of the word. When it comes to doing what's right, Izuku basically possesses no respect for hierarchy, and this is noticeable over and over again. These bullets fit in well with his character intrinsically as well. Being bullied for being quirkless, it makes sense that Izuku disobeys hierarchy. It's done nothing but cause a shit ton of misery for 10 years of his life. His entire life has been one gigantic push against the oppressive hierarchy that's done everything it can to crush his spirit and his dreams, and he's pushed on. Izuku isn't the perfect example of an anarchist. He still believes in some forms of hierarchy, but if Izuku keeps going the way he has been, I think it's a fairly safe bet that he'll reach the natural conclusions of his beliefs. If I were to hazard a guess, the path Izuku has begun to take when it comes to hero society is that he will begin to oppose the way society is structured, and will return to that path shortly. Just because he engages within the ranking systems of the hero society that he lives within doesn't mean he likes it, or how it operates, or how it works, or that My Hero Academia isn't saying something about the system. To argue that Izuku engages with this and therefore completely accepts it would be to argue that Edward Elric is a fascist because he started working out for a fascist state, and I would call you an absolute lunatic if you made that argument. My Hero Academia is still ongoing, but if I'm proven wrong on this, I'll put my hands up to that. But right now, I would say that this seems to be the direction in which it's heading, and where Izuku as a character himself is heading. Next up, Shigaraki, one of the main villains of My Hero Academia. And to give him the briefest overview imaginable in order to avoid spoilers, Shigaraki hates Hero Society and wants to destroy it because he feels that society abandoned him and the heroes didn't do anything to help him growing up in an abusive household. Pardon me for getting triggered for a moment, but because I've been seeing this argument on a lot of Discords and on Twitter, no, Shigaraki is not a socialist or a communist. Just what? No, please, shut up or fuck off. Preferably both, but no, Jesus Christ, to argue this is unironically is to be the wily coyote of basic facts, constantly chasing after the truth that will never be caught because it doesn't exist. As we've established, My Hero Academia society is rampantly capitalistic, and that rampant capitalism has caused a great deal of harm. And the argument in favour of Shigaraki being some sort of socialist is the fact that he opposes this. This is flatly untrue. You know who else reportedly opposed capitalism? The Nazis. The difference there is they then went in a capitalist direction after they took power, consolidating corporate power back into the state. And I know I keep bringing them up a lot, but for this guy, it's pretty much the perfect analogy. He grew up, had a shit life, raged out, and then found someone in society he could blame for everything that happened to him. And he is driven by one thing and one thing alone. Utter, abject hatred for anyone who isn't him. He will utilize anyone, use any method, and destroy anyone who gets in his way of doing what it is that he wishes to do. Not to mention he's now basically in charge of a fascist Quirk supremacist group in the Quirk Liberation Army. Oh, and look at that, he's now collaborating with corporate power. I wonder where this will go. Shigaraki isn't a socialist. He's a fascist. Hyper-individualistic fascist, bit more in destruction than control, but a fascist nonetheless, who was taught to be the way he was by the literal de facto dictator of Japan that all might has fought twice. All for One is also a fascist. Consolidation of the state, total authoritarianism, a shadow government, a strong rule over the weak mentality. The guy's a fascist, and he raised Shigaraki to be the exact same. He stands opposite to Izuku and Hero Society as a whole. See, many people seem to be under the impression that socialism and leftism in general seeks to destroy society, when in reality it is the desire to reform it into a society that truly helps the greatest number of people possible. Fascism seeks to destroy what it dislikes within a society, but in both cases they oppose capitalism. The difference is socialism opposed capitalism because of the inherent inequality and suffering it causes. Fascism opposes capitalism because it recognizes that capitalism is grinding itself to death, which My Hero Academia society pretty clearly is, but we'll come back to that particular notion later, and offers an out to the disaffected. Join me, and we will tear down those people who make our lives miserable. We'll rebuild society on our image. The League of Villain is full of characters who have their own goals, but as is common in right-leaning politics, we'll work with other people to achieve shared goals, even in spite of having opposing end goals. Shigaraki and Izuku were diametric opposites, but I believe that this is because they both oppose Hero Society. The difference is Izuku takes from a left-leaning perspective, and Shigaraki takes the right. Izuku, I believe, will grow to see more and more of the harm caused by modern Hero Society, and will begin to question what it actually is to be a hero, and why performative heroism is valued far more than actual heroic feats. He's already shown an aversion to several ways in which Hero Society operates, and the harm it causes people, and I don't think it will take long before he starts to question why Hero Society operates in this way. I think Izuku will become instrumental in reforming Hero Society, in changing the priorities and changing how it operates and eradicating the corruption and ways that which integrity is compromised. but he does so simultaneously in opposition to Shigaraki, who just wishes to destroy everything about Hero Society in order to get at those he feels has wronged him. When we look at Hero Society from the lens of a capitalist society, the left and right sides of politics become pretty clear. Moving on to our third character, I want to look at one of My Hero Academia's most well-known villains, Stain. One of the most interesting characters within My Hero Academia when we talk about the politics of the world, because he is more or less the antithesis of how the world operates as it exists. Stain believes heroes should seek not glory or fortune, but that even the term hero should be reserved for those who accomplish truly amazing feats and save people. It's for this reason that he believes All Might is one of the only true heroes within Hero Society. For me, it's honestly hard to argue with him. Before we even met Stain, the idea of heroism being deeply tied to corporations was one that was firmly cemented. And we're brought up in many situations, the idea of earning money is Uraraki's entire goal when it comes to heroism, and the sports festival is more or less relegated to a marketing campaign throughout its entirety. It's hard to shake the feeling that what Stain says has merit. That heroism has become a tool primarily for people to seek out personal validation and fortunes. Stain realised that merely calling out his politics wouldn't achieve many results. So he acted. He became the hero killer. Stain's devotions to his ideals are highlighted very quickly and he is introduced into the story. There's even a scene in The Monk where after Stain crippled Ida's brother, Ida hunted him down for revenge. Stain even pointed out the hypocrisy in what Ida was doing. Ida was a hero in training, but he prioritised what he felt and what he wanted over what his duty as a hero should have been. Saving someone whose sin had been about to kill. This had a pretty profound effect on Ida, and the effect it had on a lot of viewers as well. It was a pretty fucking strong power play, if nothing else. What I find particularly interesting is that the story never seems to comment on if Stain was in the right or in the wrong. At least of the current chapter, Stain's ideals haven't been considered right or wrong yet by any of the main cast. But as more and more Hero Society is revealed, more and more people seem to be coming over to Stain's side. That Hero Society is fundamentally corrupt, and that it needs change. Stain is opposed, yes, but it's never talked about if he is right or wrong empirically. Speaking personally, I'm entirely on Stain's side. I would go as far as to say his attacks on heroes are justified, and the outlook that he has on the nature of Hero Society is fundamentally correct. Even Izuku at one point has been shown to at least understand where Stain was coming from, even if he disagreed with him overall. And it's clear that the message Stain preached resonated with a lot of people. Much of the League of Villains' new recruits were inspired to join because of the belief Stain was a member and was acting in their name. Dabai and Spinner in particular are notable radicals that have been victimized by the Society of Heroes. Musa seems implied to have a deep grudge against the way Hero Society's hierarchy is structured, and Selgu is the victim of primarily a lack of social understanding when it comes to Quirks, which prevented her from getting medical treatment needed to make her functional. Also, can I point out the fact that even goddamn stores will sell Stain merchandise? Christ, there's nothing to... Ugh. It's kind of depressing that there isn't anything safe in this world from the pursuit of profit. To me, Stain was shown early on intentionally. Izuku's real foray into the world of heroism is still very recent, and he's yet to see a lot of the honestly messed up aspects of hero culture firsthand. As I've already specified, it becomes more and more intertwined, and I think it's possible that he'll begin to understand and even start to empathise with what Stain was trying to tell others about Hero Society, even if he doesn't agree with the methods. Izuku doesn't care about popularity or ranking, and he doesn't even seem to care about money either. He engages with them because they're part of hero culture, not because he cares about them intrinsically. He should care about people, time and time again. And as he sees people being oppressed by the status quo heroes enforce, it would make sense to me that he would begin to question what it really means to be a hero. The key difference is, Stain believes the Hero Society won't change voluntarily, that those in power will never give up their power willingly. He believes in violence to get the job done. Izuku, I don't know how he'll develop, but for right now he opposes the use of violence. Just a quick reminder that we're all violence, political or otherwise, is entirely unethical. Absolutely, in all circumstances, without question. Always. Stain's message is shown to be powerful to a lot of people. Many admire him in spite of his villainy, and faith in heroism seems to be becoming more and more lacking, and it's been brought up time and time again. It comes up in a time where we're all starting to question authority a hell of a lot more. Which brings me to All Might. But Stan and Shigaraki are antithesis to Hero Society. All Might embodies it, but the overall good he has done has become questionable as of late, at least to me. When All Might started off as a youth that wanted to change the world and free people from the crime syndicates that ruled over Japan, his existence hints towards one of the most sinister parts of Hero Society, and that's hero worship. All Might is unquestioningly the subject of hero worship, particularly at the hands of Izuku. Izuku idolizes All Might and longs to be just like him. All Might's goals and the work that he has done has been noble. It's hard to deny that. Even as anti-establishment as he was, Stan also considered that All Might was a true hero. But All Might is a symbol, a figure, the symbol of peace, and he is mortal. When All Might lost the ability to use his quirk after All for One was defeated in the Camino War, it didn't usher in a new era of peace, but did the exact opposite. Crime was noted to have risen. People who had been hiding underground came out from the woodworks and began to act out in all manner of ways. It's also noticeable that after the fall of All Might, the violence in the streets dramatically rose as well. Far more people began to just straight up die as well. In some pretty horrifying ways too. Without All Might there to protect people, heroism has become weaker and more people are making a displeasure with the systems known. Well, I don't think it was intentional. All Might became a symbol of admiration of authority. Many fascist regimes have symbols of the leaders, or those that serve the state having personal glory that all servants are expected to strive towards. And that's what All Might became. The problem with fascism, though, why it doesn't work, is because when that leader is gone, the image, the system, it falls apart. After Hitler and Mussolini fell, their nations, their empires, the rhetoric they espoused to their people, it all fell. Without the leader who had everything planned, where is there to go? All Might became this, despite the best of intentions. He believed the symbol was necessary, and that for the time that he grew up in, maybe it was. The symbol gave people hope, inspired them to do better. But that symbol has been stretched into an era where it's no longer needed. One person cannot maintain peace. It simply can't be done without devolving into authoritarianism, or it leaves a vacuum. And that vacuum is what All Might has left. To put it simply, the ideology All Might ascribes to, that the people need a symbol to look up to, is false. Without that symbol in those systems, society is always going to fall. The symbols All Might wanted were to be the holders of one for all, but they would be mortal themselves. Eventually this lineage of symbols would fall, and society would fall into the state it's been shown to be in now. Additionally, All Might has been shown to have some odd views about what the symbol should be. He wants the existence of one for all being kept secret for practical reasons, but also because he wants people to think that the symbol of peace is just something you're born into. I don't actually understand what he's trying to say here. This is such an odd belief to hold, rather than encouraging people that anyone can become a hero and the symbol of justice and well-doing within the world. He wants to only ascribe to the predisposed number of people. It's a very biological prescriptive framework for him to work. I'm not sure why he believes this. It actually makes him incredibly hypocritical when the fact that he was born quirkless was taken into account. The biggest flaw of All Might, though, is the fact that he wished to continue an idea of the symbol of peace, when the simple fact is the idea is flawed and can't be sustained. When a symbol vanishes, so does the peace itself. What All Might creates is the illusion of peace. Not an actual solution to those issues, and by extension he creates a fake peace, which is just waiting to burst the first chance it gets. With the fall of All Might, hero seems to become more prominent in order to deal with the many new issues of the society without its symbol of peace. The way in which heroes operate has had to change. What I find interesting is that this isn't a new phenomenon, it's a resurgence. New teams were reportedly more common in the past, before All Might appeared. Were I feeling uncharitable, which is a lot of the time with this franchise these days, I could call All Might perhaps the indirect cause of the broken society My Hero Academia takes place within. By invoking a hyper-individualistic approach to heroism, All Might inspired the generation of people to abandon the ideas of collaborative efforts to maintain peace. Self-interest runs rampant, and I don't think that's a coincidence that it began after All Might made his debut, showing up on numerous adverts and acting like a celebrity in order to create the image that he sought. Do I think he did this intentionally? Of course not. What I do think is that All Might is someone too set in his ways to acknowledge the world as it needs to exist now.
He wishes to establish a new symbol of peace in Izuku, but the world needs collaboration in order to survive. The world has shown that it needs collaboration between heroes in order to just maintain peace. This is where I feel All Might failed.
Rather than trying to make everyone unilaterally work as one, he has instead encouraged an atmosphere of hyper-individualism. At one time, that was needed. He helped to create a world where he was the centre of attention, and that people would look up to him rather than looking down and seeing the people that lived in the streets and in poverty, the oppressive way certain quirks are treated, and how people who could use their quirks for good are forbidden to by the society by law. He never sought to address the cause of villainy, just beat it down when it showed up. But society no longer needs a pillar, a symbol, to stand. What it requires is a foundation, all manner of people, to maintain peace, because this is the only way that it can be maintained effectively. One person can't maintain peace. It's always doomed to fail. And with the rise of hero teams within My Hero Academia, I think that's the way the story will go. Collectivist efforts in order to fix society and make it a place that people can live in. All Might represents the old ways, the golden age. Izuku represents the new generation that has to tackle the issues of the old. All Might failed in the long run. His ideology created a short-term solution, but in the long term, it simply won't stand on its own. If we wanted to compare him to the world in a capitalistic sense, All Might is the persona of capitalism, something which the world needed in order to move forward from feudalism, or in My Hero Academia's case, a world run by all for one. But now it's long past its use-by date. The longer it remains, the more damage it's done to society, regardless of the intention All Might himself, or the enlightened thinkers of the 17th century who proposed the idea of capitalism had. A force for good of its time, but a force which now has existed beyond its time, and now continues to damage society. And this goes right down to the quirk one for all, passed on to generation. It becomes stronger and stronger, but harder to control, until it ends up in the hands of Izuku, who can't even use it at its full power without battering his body to pieces. A quirk that will eventually become unusable as its power becomes harder and harder to maintain. Think about it. Izuku could barely even contain One for All, and that's after 9 generations. Will that happen to everyone who inherits it after him? How long until it becomes completely unusable? Until it destroys someone? One for All is a ticking time bomb, but it's also the only quirk that can be used against All for One, since it can't be stolen. And if it fails to defeat All for One before it becomes unusable, what does that lead to? What does that suggest to us? Of course, that last part is mostly speculation. We don't know if One for All can become utterly unusable, but if Izuku is anything to go by, I'd say it's a pretty solid possibility. Is it really surprising that someone like Endeavor became the second most popular hero? Endeavor is an interesting one to be sure, but I'm not entirely sure I can mark him down as a political player. There's a lot of crap I could give him, but there's also an argument to be made for his fair shot at redemption. I'm not sure on that one, but I can say this. Endeavor is a symptom of the society of My Hero Academia. He isn't a cause. We've already gone over All Might and the society of My Hero Academia, and how it prioritizes aesthetics and strength and power. Endeavor is the result of what happens to people who grow in that society. He's self-interested, short-sighted, selfish, abusive, and ruthlessly authoritarian within his own household. He's like Bakugo in that respect. These are what people who grow up in fascist societies end up becoming. And the story has never once said that these two people are good people in the context of the story. They've been given all the shit in the world. They're beginning to grow out of the circumstances they were born into, though, and this is why they're such well-liked characters, because the fact that their society encourages them to act in ways like this and rewards them for it says plenty in and of itself. However, what cannot be disputed is the fact that the world is hyper-capitalistic. Heroes are worshipped and used to push products while the common individual struggles to get by because of the lack of opportunities afforded. People struggle every day, because to allow quirks to be used more acceptably within society would be to change the economic system that those at the top benefit from. Like in our world, the bourgeoisie prosper from our own late-stage capitalism, while the proletariat struggles to get by. Quality of life has increased, yes, but proportional to the bourgeoisie, the differences between us and them are greater to those of the peasantry and the pharaohs. It is unquestioningly authoritarian too. The suppression of quirks and the efforts put in place to cover up incidents from All Might's original fight with All for One, to Izuku, Todoroki, and Ida having to give credit for defeating Stain, to Endeavour to not embarrass the hero and police departments, and to Gran Torino Albright stating it. They live in the nature of oppression, of which heroes uphold the status quo. If this system worked, why do villains keep creeping up? Hasn't anyone tried to figure out the underlying issues of their society, to figure out why so many villains keep cropping up? It's so easy to say because they can't control their quirks or they're insane or something like that. To this I make this argument. Nazis online tend to use the 1350 argument that despite being 13% of the population, black people commit 50% of the crime. This statistic is true, but not once they ever question why this is. In the case of the Nazis, they used this to support their belief that black people are more violent, and usually use it to say that we need to live in ethno-states. It doesn't actually address the social prejudices, tensions, generational poverty, systematic discrimination, lower average household income, poorer funding to black neighbourhoods and schools, gerrymandering to prevent black people from voting, and the myriad of other ways that black people are fucked over in the West that will force a great number of them to commit criminal acts in order to just survive. I'm not sure that hero society is much different. We've already seen prejudice against people who have villainous quirks like Shinso's, as well as a lack of understanding from a mental health perspective as shown with Toga, the feeling of alienation by Gentle and the brother, and the absolutely horrific hand at life in which Shigaraki was dealt that sent him spiralling down to the depths of complete fucking horror he's now going through. It wouldn't strike me as all that difficult for a similar statistic to crop up in My Hero Academia as well, while addressing none of the societal issues that plague their society. The point I'm making here is that with ideas like this, it's easy to demonize. And that happens a lot in My Hero Academia society. So many of the people who demonize in this way in the real world tend to be fascists too. The absolute pricks. It's all kept separate from heroism, probably because to fix those issues would cost more money than the governments of My Hero Academia's world is willing to spend. There's the thing about authoritarianism. So they always doom to fail. So after all of that, what needs to be done to fix this society? That's the real reason anyone gets into politics. To see change in the world. I'm a leftist. Specifically, I'm an anarcho-communist, libertarian socialist. I'm about as radically far to the left as you can get without going into authoritarianism. My goal is to help people, to flatten hierarchy, and to create a world in which the systems permit the greatest amount of freedom possible for those within that society, and every single individual within it, regardless of race, sex, religion, or anything of the sorts. I want the very concept of nations to be eradicated so we all live in one unified Earth, before we send ships out into the solar system to colonize the rest of the galaxy. The things I would do to reform society are radical, to say the least, and could probably be applied to any world. So let's see what I would do to try and fix the hero system. There's a lot to go over, so we'll do this in points. The first thing, the hero ranking system needs to fucking go. It creates vastly unnecessary conflict between heroes who are supposed to be working as a singular force to protect the common man. It has spawned people like Endeavour who do terrible things to their families in the name of power and status, and I cannot for the life of me think of a single benefit it offers society. It just makes things a sport for an actually important profession. The concept of the symbol of peace, that needs to go too. Maybe it was a valuable idea at one time, but My Hero Academia society needs a foundation of heroes that are working to maintain peace, and a single individual cannot maintain peace. It must be done through as many individuals as possible. Corporate sponsorships need to be gotten rid of as well. The conflict of interest is too great. The ability for a corporation to just buy heroes is way too much of a risk for a society that prides itself on power and hyper-individuality like this one. Allowing corporate interference on state matters is a violation of integrity that I think is too much to bear. This would also reduce the worship of heroism, I feel, since they would no longer be treated like celebrities. Hero worship will always exist in this society, but if it is to exist, it should be tempered to a degree. No one hero should have as much individual influence as All Might did, lest the rest of the entirety of hierarchy of heroism fall flat on its face once again when that person decides to retire or leave or dies. Restrictions on quirks and individual freedoms also need to be loosened. Probably not a good idea to just let people use their quirks freely, there's still a lot of risks involved with that. But I would advocate for, say, the creation of air corridors for people who have flight quirks. Movement lanes akin to bike lanes for people who have movement quirks. And I would make it much easier for people to acquire licenses for the use of their quirks in workplaces. There are plenty of areas that a huge number of quirks would be useful in. There are plenty of jobs to be made within this society. This would have the added benefit of desaturating the hero industry, which also needs to be scaled back and restructured. Worker co-ops for heroes would be a good idea in my eyes. A worker co-op is an economic model in which the business is not owned by a single owner at the top, but is instead owned collectively by everyone who works at the company. Everyone is given a certain degree of democratic power within that company, the policies that the company has, and what the company does. Say, for sake of example, you don't like your workplace's casual Friday. You can work and organise with your fellow workers in order to vote to be rid of that casual Friday. Managers can be democratically elected by the workers and voted out if they do not represent the will or the concerns of the workers underneath them. In a hero society, this would dramatically flatten the hierarchy of heroes and civilian workers. And if I've sold you on that, then I've probably sold you on socialism, because that's more or less all socialism is, which is good because capitalism in hero society needs to go as well. Capitalism has caused a huge amount of problems within hero society, from corrupting heroes to bringing out the worst elements of people to economic stifling and causing a huge harm in another number of ways. Redistribution of wealth to the poorer echelons of society, the people who usually end up becoming villains, will help fix socio-economic issues there as well as active campaigns in order to fix more downrun areas and help people get back onto their feet so they have a solid shot at life. Socialism doesn't fix everything in our society either, but that's not the goal. The goal isn't to create a perfectly fixed society. The goal of improving the world never stops. The goal is to create a society which is harder to abuse, less likely to create corruption, and will fix a wide variety of issues. It's not a permanent solution, but it is a better system. And once that's in place and the infrastructure is up to date, who knows where we can go from there. I once saw a thumbnail by Mother's Basement that claimed that My Hero Academia was the show that saves us from the communism of Naruto, which was... well, there was certainly an amusing image. Look, even did a hammer and sickle into the headband. I actually admire the dedication here. But this is pretty much factually inaccurate. My Hero Academia represents the politics of collectivism, anarchism, communism and socialism. Just because it takes place in a hyper-capitalistic world doesn't mean that it supports these things. In fact, it takes the opportunity to point out that these flaws in the world and show how broken the system is. But it never shines away from the promotion of hard work, which socialism and communism doesn't do either. I could go as far as to say that the story of My Hero Academia isn't about Izuku becoming a hero, but the story of a society reaching a turning point, and the change it has to undergo in order to face a new age. Maybe that video was alright though, I never watched it. The thumbnail just made me chuckle. There are 1,000 more things I could say about My Hero Academia. How the Quirk Liberation Army is absolutely a fascist group, and how the League of Villains is a fascist group, how different characters embody different political philosophies. I could shout at idiots who claim Tiger is trans, and therefore My Hero Academia cannot possibly be fascist, when they exist in the world where a cat can possess a fucking bus, and a human can look like a centipede, so I'd say that we need to adjust our perspective slightly. Or I could just gush about certain characters and spend the next 7,000 years giving shit to the ones I don't like, or go completely insane over what I believe are poor writing choices. But I need other videos to go into those specifically, and the next politics of video I want to go into will be that of Attack on Titan. Yeah, that'll be fun, won't it? I complain a lot, but My Hero Academia is a show I care about a lot. Maybe I think about it a bit too much, but I would have written all the fanfiction if I didn't care about this stupid fucking show. It changed my life. It's a bit too dramatic, but it's true. I'll always hold it in regard for that. Thank you for watching this video. I'd like to do a few more of these and see if they go well. I wanted to do My Hero Academia first because it means so much to me and I have met so many people through it. Maybe I've just spent the last hour talking absolute complete nonsense, but it was fun nonsense and I enjoyed it. I hope at least people can see where I'm coming from with all of this. Thank you very much for watching.